Good afternoon. This is James Holland. I'm with the Abilene Area Chamber of Commerce, and you are watching Abilene Means Business here on Eagle Communications Channel 2. This is our monthly show, kind of highlighting some of the members of the Abilene Area Chamber of Commerce, and sharing with them how they, what they bring to the community, what the community brings to them. And today my guest is Gary Guccione. And correct me, what is it? Executive Director of the National Greyhound Association?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, nailed that one.
Right.
Yeah, and the NGA, for those of you who don't know where it's at, the National Greyhound Association facility is out on Old Highway 40, just west of town as you're heading towards Solomon. If you've ever been out that way, you've probably noticed a few racetracks and kennels and that type of thing. But I think we'll visit a little bit about the NGA, how it came to be in Abilene, Dickinson County, and its economic impact. And Gary is how many years have you been executive director? It's been quite a few.
Since '82, so what's that, 33 years?
Yeah, it's quite a while.
Yeah.
Well, you've forgotten more than most people know about dogs in general, let alone just greyhounds. So,
Okay.
so tell us a little bit, share with our audience a little bit about the National Greyhound Association and how it came to be located in Abilene.
Well, the organization really got started and was born in 1906 up in a little town called Friend, Nebraska. It's almost straight up K-15. And from that point on, it was the registry for all of the racing greyhounds. And really, there was no track racing even back then, but they were running coursing events around the country, especially in the Midwest. And the headquarters were really wherever the executive director lived. It was at his house until 1944, when and we were called the National Coursing Association back then. But we purchased this land here in June of '44, which historically for Abilene was also the time our home son Ike was invading Europe, D-Day.
Yeah.
That same month we purchased this land. So we've been here since that time in Abilene, initially down at the United building until 1960 when we built this building here. But it was so centrally located, and there were a lot of greyhound farms even back then here. And the city of Abilene was very cooperative in assisting us in acquiring this land. That's why we're here in Abilene.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, and there is was there a collection of greyhound kennels in this area prior to the NGA, or did that kind of come afterwards because of proximity, or which came first, I guess?
There were a few here, and some powerful people in the association were close by. I think that helped as well.
Yeah.
But the real big numbers came afterward, after we settled here, and especially in the 70s and 80s, a lot of farms. But we have for many decades now been we call ourselves the greyhound capital of the world, actually,
right.
But
yeah.
More greyhounds are raised in Dickinson County than any other county in the country. Plus, it's the headquarters for the NGA, and the Greyhound Hall of Fame was built here in 1973, so
right.
No one has disputed that claim of being the greyhound capital of the world.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about the relationship between the Greyhound Hall of Fame and the NGA. I mean, I know they're two separate entities, but I'm sure there's a lot of mutual. There has to be. Right?
Yeah, the Hall of Fame was one of those rare programs that was endorsed by everyone in the industry, and we represent the owners and breeders, and not often do we agree with the racetracks in political issues or policies and whatnot.
Sure.
But on this particular project, we all agreed, and in 1963, the Greyhound Hall of Fame was created, and it was housed here at the NGA at the time. Yeah. But the actual building didn't really get built until 1973. And it remains a joint effort of the Racetracks Association, which is called the American Greyhound Track Operators, AGTOA, and the NGA. The board of directors at the Hall of Fame is comprised half of the tracks and half of NGA members. And yeah, we have a very close relationship. And through the years with the inductions and whatnot, a part of our meet programs are conducted down there, particularly the inductions of the Hall of Fame. It's a separate entity, run on its own, but really closely affiliated with us and with the track operators.
Yeah. And if you're a local person or somebody in the region or even a traveler who just happens to be watching this at a hotel or something in the region, the Hall of Fame is an interesting walkthrough with the history of greyhounds and the breeding and the track history and that type of thing. And of course, they have a couple of pets down there who you're willing, who are always glad to get some affection from a traveler coming through. And the old Pet Me billboards, I think, have been very popular, for them for quite a while. And
it's a pretty unique museum, and the Greyhounds are wonderful ambassadors and greeters and whatnot. But yeah, you'll see things in there that you won't in most museums. The admission, there's no charge, so it's a great place to come and visit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're here in November, but back about a month and a half ago, we're not. Were we in November?
Yeah, over a month ago we were, Yeah.
I've been so busy chambering. That's my new verb I've created. But I've been doing that so much I lose track of time. So you had the fall meet. So visit a little bit about what is the spring meet, fall meet, what happens at those occasions. Which
big part of what we do at the NGA. Of course, our day-to-day job here is to register the greyhounds, keep track of their pedigrees, identity, ownership, etc. But twice a year we host the national meets here in Abilene in April and in October, and those are really big events in the industry because they bring people together not only from around the country, but a few people even from overseas. It's a great week of entertainment, of everyone kind of reconnecting, getting back together here. We have the main highlights are the racetrack stakes and the racing program for the young puppies. These are pups that have never been to a racetrack before. And then at the end of the meets, we have an auction where most of those greyhounds parade through the auction ring and are sold. And so we attract a lot of people, buyers, sellers, onlookers, old-timers, new people. It's just really a great collection of maybe 550 people that come to town. The fall one is always a little bigger than the spring, and we had a very successful meet with that. The weather cooperated. I never say this perfectly, both for the week before when we do our schooling races, when we give the pups a chance to get acclimated to the racetrack, and the week of the meet itself. There was no rain, and we're notorious for bringing rain to the area during our meets, and no rain during the meets, no rain during schooling. Very minimal wind. It was perfect. Temperatures were super. I mean, we hadn't seen anything like it, and it wasn't that long ago, a few years ago, where we had snow on the ground.
Yeah, I remember some
during our
muddy
meets.
trips.
Once in October, and once in April. Unbelievable. Had never seen that in all our years here during a meet. So people always call up and they say, "What should we wear? What should we bring clothing-wise to Abilene for the meet?" Well, if you're going to be here for the whole week, bring it all.
Yeah.
Bring the short sleeves, bring the sweaters, just in case.
Yeah. So how many dogs come to Abilene during those weekends?
Well, at this last meet, we had 432 pups, and most of those, probably 90% of those, go into our auction. We ran 14 different stake races. It always depends on how many entries we get determining the stake races.
Right.
And we get a lot of sponsorship locally and around the country of those in the greyhound industry that support the stakes, and all that money goes into purses for that. But the big reason most of those people have their pups in here is to get them in the auction.
Right.
They might win 400 or 500 for winning a big stake race during the week, but they might turn around and sell that greyhound. Well, the average price at our auctions is about $8,000 or $9,000 per dog now. And at this last meet, we had a pup sell for $51,000. So some pretty good prices. And we went over $1 million in the sales for young pups, which is kind of the barometer of if it's a good meet or not so good meet. And we've had about 6 or 7 straight $1 million plus auctions here now. So the meets are really doing well.
Yeah, and when you have those meets, we see obviously a surge of economic activity in the community, and
Oh, yeah.
and so we appreciate that. And I'm sure that each kennel brings an entourage of folks, people that are caring for the dogs, the owners, whomever. So it's it's not one visitor per dog certainly. And
No,
maybe
that's not.
it's more than that. I mean,
Maybe
it's
the
quite a few
whole
people.
family might come in. Some
Right.
might come in later in the week. The attendance peaks really toward the end on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday as we run our finals and then move right into the auction after that. So.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question about, I don't know if it's Greyhound folklore or fact, but tell me, you've probably heard something and you know everything about this, but about the decoys and why we have 2 tracks in Abilene. I've heard, and maybe it's folklore, and tell me if it is, but that there's a certain type of decoy that is very, very rare, and there's one here, and that's, for whatever reason, that's what allows us to have 2 tracks according to the association, or something like that. Have you ever heard this before?
Never.
You've never heard that before?
Never heard that before. I was
Interesting.
here when the second track was built. We built our track, I think it was in '71, and then it was a few years after that a couple of local businessmen posed the question to the NGA, can we run schooling races year-round at this track? And the consensus from the nominators from around the country was, no, we don't want that to happen. We want to keep that exclusively for the meets.
Right.
It would give too big of an edge to the locals to be running on that. So they built virtually an identical track over here at the time.
Right.
Our schooling track, our racetrack here can only be used during those 2 weeks, actually 4 weeks, the week before for schooling
Right.
and the actual race meet itself.
Yeah.
That's all we've ever used. Whereas the track over here, weather permitting, they'll go, year round.
Yeah.
So, but that was the thing. Nothing about
Okay.
decoys or anything like that. I love how these legends grow.
It was probably an old Greyhound guy that was pulling my leg and told me that one day.
Could have been.
And so he had some credibility, and I bought it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
or at least I had to ask the question. So thanks for for setting me straight on that.
Yeah, we
That's
rent the
awesome.
same lure system. Well, now we've purchased them from Pensacola, Florida, that Maury uses at his training track over here. And Maury's actually our lure operator during the meet. So,
Sure.
We got a good cooperation with them and work together on things. So,
Absolutely. Well, that's cool. And there's the industry here locally. I know it's got a lot of spin-off. Do we have a lot of, at least in the region, maybe dog food companies, other types of spin-off, or is that not as big of an impact as you might think?
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
We've got 40, 50 farms still in the county, basically, and the feed companies, the veterinarians.
Yeah,
A lot of service going into the veterinarians here locally. And we have Greyhound transportation going on, people coming in and out all the time, taking Greyhounds off the farm, taking them to the track, and vice versa. So, it's pretty active and pretty busy. There have been a reduction in the number of racetracks around the country, consequently a reduction in the number of Greyhounds being bred and the number of people involved.
Right.
But here it's stayed pretty steady, and I think a lot of it is the accessibility of the training facilities, the meets, the good climate, that whole thing. So, so Abilene has remained pretty steady with the industry, but there have been quite a few declines. We used to have a couple racetracks here in Kansas that aren't open anymore. There's still some talk and effort of maybe trying to get those going again.
Yeah, certainly was one topic I wanted to touch on with you. Is the, you mentioned reduction of tracks. A lot of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but has been largely a legislative issue. It's not demand necessarily, but it's the demand after there's legislation that's not permitting as many tracks or making it difficult to operate a track.
Yeah, certainly some of that is legislative. Here in Kansas, they approved a few years back that slot machines could go into the racetracks, but they set the tax so high that it wasn't practical or realistic for the tracks to pursue it. So Kansas had the infamous uniqueness of being the only state that adopts a method of improving the racetrack operation, but it ends up resulting in the closing of the racetracks.
The unintended
Unbelievable
consequences of it.
So
and
it all happened. It was a perfect storm right at that same time. The economy tanked. The percentage might have worked. They was right on the edge of working as it was, but when the economy went south, it was a no-go at all. Now they're trying to get some legislation back that would maybe bring those tracks back. Phil Ruffin is working hard on that. The Kansas Greyhound Association continues to work. The horse people continue to work on that as well, because their tracks closed at the same time. Horse racing is facing many of the same challenges that we are, and we're seeing a number of those tracks closing as well that need to be supplemented with other types of gaming to help the racing product. And that's basically what's helping the industry more than anything right now, horse racing as well. So we remain very active in legislatures around the country, particularly right now in Florida, where most of the racetracks are, and West Virginia is another key state, and Kansas too is involved.
Sure, sure. Well, and I've got a libertarian statement to say relative to that, but it seems like, gambling is a form of entertainment, and of course going to the races is a form of entertainment, whether there's wagering or not. It's not a whole lot different than your fantasy football or those other types of things that are, and handicapping is an art, so it's not even necessarily up to complete chance. So it's kind of from the standpoint that why is the government involved in our entertainment and they see it as a profit motive. I mean, that's their opportunity to gain money for things that maybe they do or don't need to be doing anyway. But so there's an editorial that I think racetracks in Kansas is a prime example of interfering with things that are hurting the local economy from a state legislative standpoint.
Yeah, very much. And there has been an increase in competition for the entertainment dollar, especially with other casinos, the Indian casinos that have opened up. You can talk about all sports, NASCAR, everything else that has grown. Even home entertainment is a lot more fun than it used to be now, with all the channels we get and everything. So those are things that have competed, and we've seen the attendance at racetracks really drop. Now, there's still a lot of people interested in racing that might be watching on the internet, off-track wagering in some places where that's allowed. And if we would take advantage of those technologies and all to the full extent, racing could continue on in the decades to come.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
you have to be creative with the online, like say the off-site online wagering, and the product you're providing is not necessarily being paid for by those who are actually enjoying it in some cases that way.
Correct.
So, it's just like the internet sales tax issue, so it's interesting, and that's why legislators get paid the big bucks to try to figure these things out, right? And
I guess so.
Absolutely.
But we fight, the deep pockets of our competition now, especially the casinos, the other casinos, can try to thwart us to maintain their monopolies or keep the competition down, and so it's difficult.
Well, it is purely a monopoly when government prevents it in other places, and so it's unfortunate, but there it is.
There it is. That's right.
And I know that the slot machine legislation several years ago was the early '80s, mid '80s or something. There were a lot of the fraternal organizations that had slot machines in their clubhouses, which once that revenue dried up, it became really hard to keep membership, and so you've seen there's been lots of different unintended or maybe in some cases intended consequences of those things. So it's unfortunate, but something we're working through, and our local legislators seem to be pretty cognizant of things, and I trust they're working hard.
Yeah, they are. I think very helpful in trying to protect our interests and keep the thing going. So, but there's who knows how many millions of fans out there that still love the sport. Greyhound racing is exciting. The Greyhounds are the fastest canines in the world 45 miles an hour and provide great entertainment and excitement and sport.
Yeah.
And for our breeders here, it's hard work to get that greyhound to the racetrack and ready to compete with others. At our auction here this last fall, the top 3 sellers were all Kansas breeders. And the top 2 were right here in the Abilene area, Jay Wrangle and the Craigie Kennel with Stephen and Julie Boyd. The third one was out from Ellis, Kansas, Steve Ward. But 7 of the top sellers were from here in Kansas. So Kansas remains the bedrock of the breeding industry.
The center of the Greyhound universe in some ways.
It is. So we need our tracks back here. That's the thing. So.
Yeah, it's pretty. There's some irony in that. That's interesting.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, and greyhounds are, the animals themselves, the dogs themselves are a pretty unique breed, right? I mean, they're very, very docile until they need to be somewhere in a hurry chasing something. And
exactly. Yeah,
but I know a lot of people. Tell me about pet. People that adopt a lot of greyhounds.
We're
retired from racing.
Very much directly involved with that. One of our offshoot organizations is called the American Greyhound Council. And again, it's one of those rare things where the tracks and the breeders agree on something. And it was created in 1987 to improve the care given to racing greyhounds, and the main focus has been on pet adoption.
Yep.
And right now there's probably 250,000 greyhound pets in the United States and growing.
Yeah.
They do make wonderful pets. It's a testimony of how well the dog has been taken care of and socialized from its puppyhood on up, being around a lot of different people, and they adapt to their new role as pets fairly easily. And most of them just do make wonderful pets.
Yeah.
I just came back from Georgia where a group of people have field sports, field coursing, lure coursing, and use some retired greyhounds for that. And when you see the greyhounds still very excited to run rather than just becoming couch potatoes, as we call them, but still anxious to run because that's what they love to do and what they do best is run. And see the enjoyment with the dogs as well as the owners was a neat thing, kind of a part of the sport in its most pure form, doing it strictly for ribbons and the entertainment and the sport of it. It was good to see.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, there you go. That's a whole lot of information about greyhounds and in the industry here, and really appreciate your time today.
All right. We'd encourage everyone to write April next spring for our next meet. I think it's the 25th through the 30th of April.
And where can people find out more about the NGA website-wise?
We're at, to get this right, www.nga.nga.com. NGAgreyhounds.com.
NGAgreyhounds.com.
Correct, yeah.
We'll put it correctly at the bottom of your screen there.
All right.
So anyway, I appreciate your time, Gary.
All right, Jim.
And anyway, that was Gary Guccione here at the NGA. Once again, a great partner with the Abilene Area Chamber of Commerce, a very vital organization to our community, and we're very appreciative and thankful for that. Anyway, I hope the holiday season's coming upon everybody. Enjoy it. Love your families out there. Be good. Time is short, so enjoy them during the season. Once again, I'm James Holland, Executive Director at the Abilene Area Chamber of Commerce, and this has been Abilene Means Business.